I still think about that Tuesday morning more than I probably should. Not because anything crazy happened that day, at least not yet. But looking back now, it was the last quiet morning I'd have for a long, long time. And I didn't know that. I was just out there tightening a loose hose on a stranger's car, wiping my hands on a rag that had seen better days, not thinking about anything deeper than whether I'd remembered to order more brake fluid. That was my life back then. Simple. Predictable. Mine. My name's Henry, and I ran a small auto shop on the edge of town. Not the kind of town you'd find on a travel blog or anything like that. Just one of those places where everybody knows your truck, your dog, and your coffee order. Population somewhere around 4,000, give or take whoever left for college and never came back. The kind of place that feels like it was built specifically to stay the same forever. I'd been running that shop for about 6 years by then. Opened it right after I turned 22 with money I'd saved up working summers at a larger garage 2 towns over. The building itself was nothing special. A pale yellow structure with a metal roof that pinged like a snare drum whenever it rained. A rolling door that groaned every single morning like it was personally offended at being opened. And a small waiting area inside with 2 plastic chairs and a coffee maker that produced something I generously called coffee. The floor was cracked concrete, permanently stained with years of oil and grease in patterns that almost looked intentional, like some kind of abstract map of everything I'd ever fixed. But it was mine. Every wrench on that pegboard, every calendar on the wall, every scratch on the workbench. Mine. I wasn't lonely exactly. I had regulars who came in and stayed too long just to talk. I had neighbors who waved every morning. I had a dog, a big goofy golden retriever named Clutch, who spent most of his days sleeping in the sun just outside the bay door and occasionally lifting his head to judge passing cars. Life was steady, manageable, but I'd be lying if I said there wasn't something missing. I just hadn't figured out what it was yet. That Tuesday, I was already under the hood of old Mr. Patterson's truck, a '98 Chevy that the man refused to retire on principle, when I heard a car pull up kind of slow and uncertain, the way people do when they're not sure they're in the right place. I stepped out, wiping my hands, and that's when I saw her for the first time. Emma. She had dark hair that fell just past her shoulders, and it was doing this thing in the morning breeze where it kept sweeping across her face, and she kept pushing it back with 2 fingers, clearly annoyed by it. She was wearing a light jacket the color of sage green and had this canvas tote bag slung over one shoulder that was stuffed so full it looked like it was holding an entire life in it. Which, as I'd later find out, it kind of was. She looked lost. Not panicked, but definitely not sure of herself either. Like someone who'd made a decision and was already second-guessing it in real time. I walked up to her and said good morning. She smiled. One of those relieved smiles people give when they've been dealing with a problem alone for too long and are finally talking to another human being. Turns out her car had been making a noise on the highway. She'd pulled off smart, didn't push it. Took me maybe 90 seconds to find the issue, a coolant hose that had slipped off its collar, nothing major. I tightened it back up, closed the hood, and told her it was on the house. She looked at me like I'd just told her the sky was green. Nothing, she said. Nothing, I said. Call it a welcome to town. She crossed her arms with this little smirk that I noticed right away, the kind that said she wasn't easily impressed but was trying not to be charmed. You do that for everyone? Only when the job takes less than 2 minutes. She laughed at that. A real laugh, not a polite one. The kind that comes out before a person decides whether or not they want it to. And I don't know. Something about that laugh just settled in the room differently than most things did. She told me her name was Emma. I told her mine was Henry. She got back in her car. And before she closed the door, she looked back at me and said thanks in a way that felt like more than just courtesy. Like she meant it. And then she was gone. I watched her car head down the road and disappear around the curve near the old mill. And then I stood there for probably 5 seconds longer than made any sense. Clutch walked up beside me and sat down, staring in the same direction like he was thinking about it too. Don't look at me like that, I told him. He yawned. I went back inside, got back under Patterson's truck, and tried very hard to focus on the task at hand. But that name, Emma, kept floating up through my thoughts like something I'd dropped that refused to sink. I figured I'd never see her again. Small town, sure, but she'd said she just arrived. People like that usually just pass through. I was wrong about that. She came back 3 days later, Friday morning, before 9. I was outside hosing down the floor of the bay when I heard that same car pull up. I recognized the sound of the engine before I even looked up, which said more about my memory than I cared to admit. She was carrying 2 paper cups from the diner down the street, the ones with the little cardboard sleeves, and she walked up like she'd already rehearsed what she was going to say. "You said coffee," she said, holding one out to me. I turned off the hose, looked at the cup, looked at her. "I thought that was a joke," I said. "I don't joke about coffee." I took the cup and she smiled at her own delivery, just barely. I noticed she'd cut her hair slightly, or maybe just wore it differently, pinned back on one side. And she looked a little less lost than she had on Tuesday. More settled. Like 3 days in the town had already started to agree with her. We stood there by the bay door and talked for probably 40 minutes. I learned that she'd moved here to be closer to her grandfather, who was getting on in age and lived alone on a piece of land about 10 minutes outside of town. She'd left a job in the city, something in contracts and property law. She mentioned it like it was a chapter she'd already closed, and was planning to stay for a while. Indefinitely, she said, which in my experience either means 3 weeks or the rest of your life. I told her about the shop, about Clutch, about the town. I caught myself talking more than I usually do. At some point, she leaned against the side of the building with her cup in both hands and just listened. And there was something about the way she listened. Really listened. Eyes on you, no phone, no distractions, that made you want to keep going. When she finally said she had to get going, I walked her to her car. She rolled the window down before she pulled out. "Same time next week?" she said. I said sure. And just like that, it became a thing. Every Friday morning for the next several weeks, Emma showed up with 2 coffees and we talked for however long we talked. Sometimes it was 20 minutes, sometimes it was over an hour. We talked about her grandfather, a quiet man named Walter, who apparently had a greenhouse in his backyard full of tomatoes he was inexplicably devoted to. We talked about the way the town changed with the seasons. She told me about growing up in a bigger city, about how she'd spent so many years moving fast that she'd forgotten what it felt like to just be somewhere. I told her more than I expected to, about my parents, about why I chose mechanics, about what it felt like to build something from nothing, and why that mattered to me in a way I couldn't fully put into words. She nodded at that like she understood it exactly. "Some people build companies," she said one morning looking out at the bay. "Some people build families. You built a place where people come when something's broken and leave when it's fixed. That's not nothing, Henry." I thought about that for a long time after she left. I was starting to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Not excitement exactly. Something quieter than that. More like when a machine that's been running rough finally finds its right rhythm and you feel it more than hear it. A settling. A rightness. But life has a way of waiting until you get comfortable. And what was about to happen, I never saw it coming. Not even close. It was a Wednesday, maybe 2 months after Emma first walked into my shop, when I got the call that rearranged everything. It came from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up. I was in the middle of a transmission job and my hands were deep in grease. And I almost let it go to voicemail. But something, I don't know what, call it instinct or just bad timing, made me pull off my glove and answer it. "Is this Henry?" a woman's voice said. "It is." "Henry from Millbrook Auto?" "That's me. What can I do for you?" There was a pause, the kind of pause that has weight to it. "My name is Vanessa Cole," she said. "I don't think you know me, but I know this is going to sound strange. I think you need to know something. About a little girl named Lily." I stood there in the middle of my shop floor with a transmission pan in one hand and a phone pressed to my ear, and I felt the whole morning go very, very still around me. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. "Who?" "Lily," she repeated. "She's 6 years old. And Henry, she's yours." The transmission pan hit the floor, I didn't even notice. I don't remember sitting down. But at some point between that phone call and the next coherent thought I was sitting on the concrete floor of my shop with my back against the workbench, one glove on, one glove off, the transmission pan lying sideways next to my knee, leaking a thin line of fluid across the floor like it had given up too. Clutch came over and put his head in my lap. He always did that when something was off. Dogs know. They always know before you do. I just sat there staring at the rolling door, at the rectangle of daylight coming in from outside, at the dust floating in it like it didn't have a care in the world. And I kept replaying those words in my head on a loop. She's 6 years old. And Henry, she's yours. And 6 years old. 6 years. I was doing the math without even meaning to, and every time I ran it back, it landed in the same place. 6 years ago, I was 22. I had just opened the shop. I was working 18-hour days and running on bad coffee and borrowed optimism. And there was a woman I'd been seeing for a few months. Brief. Intense. The kind of thing that burns fast and leaves a mark. Her name was Vanessa. We hadn't been serious. Or at least I'd thought we hadn't been. She was smart, funny in a dry kind of way, and had this habit of tilting her head slightly to the left whenever she was skeptical of something you said, which was often. We'd met at a county fair of all places. She'd been stuck behind me in line at a food stand and made a comment about the wait time that made me laugh, and we'd just started talking and never really stopped. For a while. And then one day she just wasn't there anymore. No argument. No fight. No big dramatic ending. She just got quieter, and then the calls got shorter, and then they stopped. I remembered feeling that particular kind of loneliness that comes not from a breakup, but from a fade, like watching a signal drop bar by bar until there's nothing left. I figured she'd moved on. I moved on too, or tried to. I never knew why she left. I was about to find out. I called her back from the parking lot behind the shop because I needed air. Real air, not the compressed, oil-flavored kind inside. I leaned against the back wall with one hand flat on the warm brick and dialed, and she picked up on the second ring like she'd been holding the phone. "I need you to explain this to me," I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected, which surprised me. From the beginning. All of it. She took a breath and she told me. 6 years ago, about 6 weeks after she'd stopped calling me, she found out she was pregnant. She'd been terrified. She was 23. No stable job, no family nearby, and the man she'd been seeing, me, was a guy who'd just sunk every dollar he had into a mechanic shop that might or might not survive its first year. She'd convinced herself I wasn't ready, that I'd panic, that she'd be doing me a favor by handling it on her own. "That wasn't your decision to make," I said, and my jaw was tight when I said it. "I know that now," she said quietly. "I knew it then too. I was scared, Henry." She paused. I let the silence sit there. "I met Brett about 4 months into the pregnancy," she continued. He seemed stable. He had a good job, a house. He said he wanted to be there for both of us, so I stayed with him. And I told myself Lily would have a better life. Does Lily know about me? Another pause. Longer this time. No. Brett's been the only father figure she's known. But Henry, that's part of why I'm calling. Things have changed. A lot. And she deserves to know the truth. I pressed my palm harder into the brick wall like I needed something solid to push against. "What changed?" I asked. And that's when Vanessa told me about Brett. Brett Calloway. I'd never heard the name before that phone call, and by the end of it I knew more about him than I ever wanted to. He was 41, worked in insurance, the kind of insurance guy who had a firm handshake and a warm smile, and a way of making you feel completely at ease right up until the moment you realized the warmth was entirely manufactured. He drove a silver sedan that he kept immaculate. He coached youth soccer on Saturday mornings in a way that gave him a very specific kind of reputation in the community. The kind of reputation that's really just a carefully maintained image. Behind closed doors, according to Vanessa, he was controlling, cold, and calculating. Not violent, never that, she was clear about that. But the other kind of cruel. The kind that's harder to point at. He managed money like it was a weapon. He decided what Vanessa could spend, where she could go, who she could call. He'd isolated her slowly over the years the way you'd tighten a vise, one small turn at a time, so gradual you don't notice until you can't breathe. And Lily, sweet little Lily, who I'd never met and already felt something cracking open in my chest over. She was, in Vanessa's words, invisible to him. Not mistreated, not harmed, just invisible. He tolerated her presence the way you tolerate a neighbor's wind chimes. She existed in that house and he looked past her, through her, around her. Never at her. She's a really good kid, Vanessa said, and her voice broke on that last word in a way she clearly hadn't planned for. She deserves someone who actually sees her. I closed my eyes. I thought about being 6 years old. I thought about what it means to a kid to have someone look at them, really look at them, and see something worth seeing. Why now? I asked. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm sick, she said. Simply, flatly. Like she'd rehearsed saying it simply and flatly so she wouldn't fall apart. I was diagnosed 8 weeks ago. It's serious, not terminal. They caught it, and I'm starting treatment. But it's going to be a hard road, and I need to know that if something happens, Lily has someone. Someone real. The word real landed somewhere between my ribs. I want to meet her, I said. I didn't even think about it. It just came out, straight and certain. I know, Vanessa said. That's why I called. We agreed to meet the following Saturday at a park about 20 minutes from town. Neutral ground. No Brett. Just Vanessa, Lily, and me. I didn't sleep well the nights between that call and that Saturday. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles above me and try to picture a 6-year-old I'd never met. I'd try to imagine what she looked like, what she sounded like, whether she was shy or loud. Whether she liked animals. Clutch would lose his mind over a kid, I thought. And then I'd stop myself because what was the point of imagining? Saturday would come, and she'd be real. And real was always different from imagined. I told Emma about it on Friday morning. She showed up with the coffees like always. And I was leaning against the bay door already, not really seeing anything, just standing there with my hands in my pockets. She read the room immediately. You okay? She asked, handing me a cup and studying my face the way she did. I got some news this week, I said. Big news. She waited. That was one of the things about Emma. She never rushed you. She'd just wait, patient as anything until you found the words. So I found them. I told her everything. The phone call, Vanessa, the diagnosis, Brett, and Lily. I told her about Lily last, and when I said the name out loud, I felt my voice do something I didn't entirely have control over. A slight roughness. A catch. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she sat down on the edge of the bench outside the shop, set her coffee down on the concrete, folded her hands together, and looked up at me. How do you feel? She asked. I don't know, I said. I feel like someone handed me a box and said there might be something really important in it, and also it might be empty, and you won't know until you open it. She nodded slowly. When do you open it? Tomorrow. She nodded again. Do you want me to come? I looked at her. I thought about it honestly, which meant I sat with the question instead of giving a reflex answer. Not for the first meeting, I said. But, yeah, eventually. I think I'd want that. She picked her coffee back up. Okay, she said like it was simple, like she hadn't just agreed to step into something enormous. I looked at her for a second longer than I meant to. Emma, don't overthink it, she said with a small smile. Go meet your daughter. Saturday came the way big days always do, like a regular morning that doesn't know it's different. The sun came up the same. The birds were doing their thing outside my window. Clutch wanted his breakfast at the same time as always. But my hands weren't quite steady when I poured his kibble, and I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a weirdly long time looking at myself and trying to figure out if I looked like someone's father. I drove to the park with the windows down even though it was a little cold for it. I needed the air. The park was one of those community ones with a wooden play structure that had been repainted one too many times, a couple of picnic tables, and a strip of grass that ran down to a small creek. There were a few families there. Kids running, a dog or two on leashes. Normal Saturday morning stuff. I spotted Vanessa right away. She was sitting at one of the picnic tables facing the play structure, wearing a light gray coat. She looked thinner than I imagined. I'd never actually seen a photo of her from recent years, and there was something around her eyes that read as tired in a deep-down way. Not just from sleep, but from everything. And next to the play structure, climbing the ladder to the slide with complete and total focus like it was a personal mission, was a little girl with dark pigtails and a bright red jacket. I stopped walking. I stopped. She had pigtails that were slightly uneven, like she'd done them herself or had gotten impatient halfway through. She was wearing the red jacket and little brown boots that had some kind of mud or paint on the left one. She got to the top of the slide, looked down, made a face like she was calculating the physics of it, and then went down with both arms straight up in the air in a noise that was somewhere between a shriek and a laugh. And even from 40 feet away I could see it. She had my nose. Exactly my nose. The slight bump at the bridge, the way it turned up just a fraction at the end. I'd hated that nose my entire life. I thought it looked like it belonged on someone twice my size. On her it looked perfect. I started walking again. Vanessa stood when she saw me coming. She looked nervous, which I understood, and sad, which I also understood, and something else. Something like relief. Like she'd been carrying something very heavy to the post office for a long time and had finally made it to the counter. "Henry," she said. "Vanessa," I said. We didn't hug. It wasn't that kind of moment. We just looked at each other across 6 years of distance and did the best we could with it. "She doesn't know yet," Vanessa said quietly. "I wanted to. I wanted you to meet her first, just as Henry. Just as someone Mama knows. We'll tell her the truth soon. When the time's right." "Okay," I said. "I understand." Vanessa turned toward the play structure. "Lily," she called. "Come here a second, baby." The little girl in the red jacket dropped off the climbing structure and trotted over with that particular kind of walk that little kids have. All momentum and no brakes. She stopped in front of her mom and looked up at me with enormous brown eyes that didn't have a single ounce of shyness in them, which caught me completely off guard. "Who's that?" she said, pointing directly at me, which made me want to laugh despite everything. "This is Henry," Vanessa said. "He's a friend of mine." Lily looked me up and down the way a person inspects something they're considering buying. "Do you fix cars?" she said. I blinked. "I do, actually." "How'd you know that?" "You have grease on your arm," she said, pointing at a smudge I apparently hadn't scrubbed off thoroughly enough. "My papa always has grease on his shoes from work, but he never fixes anything." Something about the way she said papa, flat, almost indifferent, hit me in a strange place. "Fair observation," I said. "You're pretty sharp." She seemed to accept this as a basic fact. "I know," she said, and then turned and ran back to the slide. Vanessa let out a quiet breath. I watched Lily climb back up that ladder with that same focused determination, and I thought about 6 years. 6 years of Saturday mornings I'd never had. 6 years of slides and pigtails in somebody else's house and a man who looked through her instead of at her. I thought about Brett Calloway in his clean silver sedan, coaching soccer with his firm handshake, and I felt something come awake in me that I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger. Not yet. Something older and quieter than anger. Something that knew how to wait. The drive home from that park took about 20 minutes. I know because I checked the clock when I pulled out of the parking lot and checked it again when I pulled into my driveway. And the whole time in between, I don't think I thought a single complete thought. Just fragments. Just images. Lily at the top of that slide with her arms up. Her uneven pigtails. The mud on her left boot. The way she'd looked at me and said, I know, like she'd been certain of her own intelligence since birth. My nose on her face. I sat in my truck in the driveway for a while after I got home. Clutch was at the front window watching me through the glass, tail going, not understanding why I wasn't coming inside. I watched him back and thought about the fact that in one phone call, in one Saturday morning at a park with a wooden play structure and a creek nearby. My entire understanding of my own life had shifted about 15 degrees in a direction I hadn't known existed. I had a daughter. A real, actual, muddy-boot, self-assured, sharp-eyed daughter who did physics calculations at the top of a slide and noticed grease on strangers' arms, and she didn't know I existed. I finally got out of the truck. The weeks that followed were careful and slow, the way you move around something fragile. Vanessa and I talked almost every day. Not romantically, nothing like that. That door had been closed a long time and neither of us wanted to open it, but practically. Like two people who suddenly found themselves on the same side of something complicated and were trying to figure out how to navigate it together without making it worse. She started chemotherapy 3 weeks after our first meeting. She told me matter-of-factly, the same way she told me most things, but I could hear the effort it took to keep her voice even. I asked if she needed anything. She said she was fine. I asked again. She said, okay, maybe someone to pick up Lily from school on Thursdays when her sister couldn't make it. I said yes before she finished the sentence. The first Thursday I picked Lily up from school, I parked outside the gates 10 minutes early and sat there watching parents and grandparents and babysitters collect kids like they were the most natural thing in the world, which I guess they were. Just not for me. Not yet. My palms were actually sweating, which was embarrassing. I'd rebuilt engines from scratch. I'd dealt with customers who brought in cars that were essentially rolling disasters and expected miracles by 5 o'clock. I did not sweat over things. Apparently, I sweated over 6-year-olds. When Lily came through the gate, she spotted me immediately. That same direct brown-eyed stare, and walked over without any of the hesitation I'd expected. "Mama said you'd be here," she said, hoisting her backpack higher. "That's me," I said. She looked at my truck, then at me, then at the truck again. "It's dirty," she said. "It's a work truck." "What kind of work makes it that dirty?" "Fixing things," I said. She thought about this while I opened the passenger door for her and helped her with the seatbelt, which she insisted on doing herself but accepted help with the actual buckle without making it a thing. "Can you fix anything?" she asked as I pulled out of the school lot. "Most things," I said. "Cars, mostly. Trucks. Anything with an engine." "Can you fix a music box?" I glanced at her. "What's wrong with it?" "It stopped playing," she said simply, looking out the window. "It was my grandma's. It has a little ballerina inside, but she doesn't spin anymore." I thought about that for a second. "I can take a look at it," I said. She turned and looked at me with those serious eyes. "You'd do that?" "Sure." She faced forward again, apparently satisfied. "Okay," she said, "I'll bring it next time." And just like that, no drama, no fanfare, there was a next time established, like she'd decided something and that was that. I kept my eyes on the road, but I was smiling in a way I was glad she couldn't fully see. I fixed the music box on a Saturday afternoon at the shop. Lily sat on a stool across the workbench from me and watched with the focused attention of someone studying for a very important exam. The problem was simple. A small spring had slipped off its post, and it took me maybe 4 minutes to sort it out. When I wound it up and set it down and the little ballerina started to turn and the tinny melody filled the shop, Lily's face did something I hadn't seen it do before. It went completely still. Not blank. Still. The way a face goes when something hits it right in a spot it didn't know was waiting to be hit. Then she picked up the box carefully, like it was made of something much more delicate than wood, and held it in both hands, watching the ballerina turn. "She sounds the same," she said quietly. "She sounds exactly the same as when Grandma had it." I didn't say anything. Sometimes the right move is to just let a moment be what it is. After a minute, she set it down gently on the workbench and looked up at me. "Thank you, Henry," she said. It was the same thing Emma had said to me that first morning. Same words, completely different weight. I felt them somewhere deep in the chest, the way you feel the bass from a speaker in your sternum, rather than hearing it with your ears. "Anytime," I said. Emma met Lily for the first time about a month into the Thursday pickups. It wasn't planned. Emma had stopped by on a Friday morning with the usual coffees, and I was just pulling up from dropping Lily at school. I'd started doing that too on some mornings just because. and the timing just happened. Emma was standing by the bay door with both cups when I came around the corner, and Lily was in the passenger seat visible through the windshield, and for a second nobody moved. Then Lily rolled down the window and looked at Emma. "Are you his girlfriend?" she asked. Emma, to her enormous credit, did not flinch. She looked at Lily with steady eyes and a calm expression and said, "I'm his friend. My name's Emma." Lily stared at her for a moment. "You have nice hair," she said. "Thank you," Emma said. "I like your boots." Lily looked down at her boots. Different pair that day, purple with little stars on them. And back up. "They have stars," she said. "I see that." "Stars are gas," Lily said. "Did you know that? They're not actually, like, pointy. They're just big balls of gas." Emma looked at her for a second and then looked at me with an expression that said, "Where did you find this child?" And I just shrugged because honestly I was still asking myself the same thing. "I did know that," Emma said seriously. "Most people don't." Lily seemed very pleased with this response. She sat back in the seat. "Okay," she said, as if a decision had been made. "You can stay." Emma raised an eyebrow at me over the roof of the truck. I mouthed sorry. She shook her head like she wasn't even a little bit sorry. Life had started to feel like it was building toward something. I could feel it the way you feel a weather change before it arrives. That shift in pressure, the air getting that particular electric quality. Things were moving. Lily was becoming real to me in a way that went beyond blood or obligation. She was just a person I wanted to be around. Sharp and strange and funny in that deadpan way that made you wonder if she was joking and then realize she absolutely wasn't. Vanessa was getting through the chemo. It was hard. There were weeks where she sounded like she was talking from the bottom of a well. But she was tough in a quiet way, and she pushed through, and every time I talked to her, I could hear her working at it. And Emma. Emma was becoming something I didn't have a clean word for yet, something between a friend and a certainty. She had a way of showing up, not in a dramatic way, not with speeches or big gestures, just showing up consistently, in the small, ordinary ways that actually count. Coffee on Fridays. A text on a Thursday evening asking how the pickup went. A question the next morning that told me she'd actually been thinking about the answer. I was not unaware of what that meant. But there was something else building too. Something darker moving in the background the whole time, and I was about to walk straight into it. It started with Brett. About 6 weeks after my first meeting with Lily, Vanessa called me on a Tuesday night, not our usual time. Her voice had a different quality to it, tighter, like she was talking through something clenched. "Brett found out you've been picking up Lily," she said. I went still. "How?" "One of the school moms apparently mentioned it." "Small world." She paused. "He's not happy, Henry." "That's not really my problem," I said carefully. "It might become one," she said. "He came home tonight and he was different. He kept asking questions about you, who you were, where you lived, what you did. He pulled it all together pretty fast." "Okay," I said slowly. "What does that mean?" "It means he knows you exist. And he knows I lied to him for 6 years about who Lily's father was." Another pause. "He's not just angry. He's calculating. That's the part that worries me." I knew what she meant. There's a kind of person who yells when they're threatened and a kind of person who goes quiet. The quiet ones are the ones you watch. "Is Lily okay?" I asked first. "She's fine. She's asleep." "And you?" "I'm fine," she said. And it was the "I'm fine" that means the opposite. I sat down on the edge of my bed after I hung up and looked at the floor for a while. Clutch came over and did his thing, head in the lap, and I put my hand on his back and thought about Brett Calloway in his clean silver sedan with his firm handshake and his calculated silences. I thought about a little girl with uneven pigtails who carried a music box to a mechanic shop and watched a ballerina spin like it was the most important thing in the world. And I thought, not her. Whatever this man is planning, whatever game he thinks he's running, it is not going to touch her. That's when things started to get complicated. The first thing Brett did surprised me. I expected confrontation, a phone call maybe, a show up at the shop thing, something loud and territorial, That's what I'd braced for. Instead, what happened was much quieter and much more deliberate, and I didn't even realize it was happening until Emma caught it. She came in on a Friday morning about a week after Vanessa's call, and she didn't look like herself. She had that particular kind of focused but unsettled expression that I'd come to recognize as her processing something she didn't like. "Can I ask you something?" she said before she'd even set the coffees down. "Yeah. Do you know a man named Brett Calloway?" The name hit me like a cold key on the back of the neck. "I know of him," I said carefully. "Why?" She set the cups down slowly. "Because he came to see my grandfather this week." I looked at her. "He introduced himself as a family friend," she continued. "Which he is not, because my grandfather said he'd never met the man before in his life. He spent about an hour with him. Very friendly, very charming, apparently. And then, almost like an afterthought, he mentioned that he'd heard the land might be up for sale and said he knew some people who might be interested in making an offer. My jaw had gone tight without me deciding it to. "Walter's land," I said. "Walter's land," she confirmed, "which is not for sale." But Brett didn't know that for certain when he went. She met my eyes. "No, he didn't." I stood up from the stool and walked to the bay door and stood there looking out at the road for a moment. My mind was running through the sequence of it. Brett finds out who I am. He finds out about Emma, probably through the same small-town information network that told him about the school pickups. He looks into Emma, finds out about the land, and decides that the fastest way to pressure me is not to come at me directly, but to go after the people around me. That was not a hot-headed move, that was a chess move. And something about that, something about the cold patience of it, made me feel something I hadn't quite felt before in this whole situation. Not fear, not exactly. More like the feeling you get when you realize the car you've been working on has a problem that goes deeper than you first thought. When you pull back one layer and find 3 more underneath. I turned around. "Emma," I said, "I need to tell you some things about Brett Calloway." She sat down and wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "I figured," she said. "Start from the beginning." So I did. I told her everything. The whole shape of it, Vanessa's call, Lily, the 6 years, the diagnosis, the cold controlling way Vanessa had described him, the silver sedan, all of it. Emma listened the way she always listened, completely and without interruption, and when I was done she was quiet for a moment, looking at the floor with that slightly tilted head expression that meant she was thinking. "He went to my grandfather," she said finally, "because he was testing something." "What do you mean?" "He wanted to see what leverage looked like," she said. "He doesn't actually care about that land. He cares about knowing where your soft spots are. He went to Walter because Walter is connected to me and I'm connected to you. And he wanted to see if pushing on that would get a reaction." I looked at her. "You sound like you've seen this before," I said. She looked up at me with an expression that was both tired and very clear. "I spent 4 years in property law," she said. "I've seen what men like Brett do when they feel like they're losing control of a situation. They don't fight. They squeeze. They find the thing that matters to you and they apply pressure to it slowly, methodically, until you either fold or make a mistake." She paused. "He's expecting you to make a mistake." I let that sit there. "Then we don't make one," I said. She nodded once, firmly, like a period at the end of a sentence. "Then we don't make one," she agreed. And sitting there in my shop with the morning light coming in at that low angle it gets in the fall, I felt something shift between us. Not romantic, well, not only that, but something more fundamental than that. A closing of the distance between two people who've decided they're on the same side of something. I didn't know it yet, but Emma had just become the most important variable in everything that was about to happen. Because Brett Calloway had made one serious miscalculation. He'd gone after the one person in this situation who knew exactly how men like him operated, and she was sitting right across from me, already thinking 3 moves ahead. There's a specific kind of silence that settles over a situation right before everything starts moving at once. I know that silence now. I'd felt versions of it before. Right before a transmission finally gives out, right before a customer admits their car is worse than they let on over the phone. Right before a storm that's been building all day finally decides to commit. It's not a peaceful silence. It's a held breath silence. The kind that has weight and direction. That's what the next 2 weeks felt like. Brett didn't make another obvious move right away. No calls, no appearances, no more visits to Walter's property. He just went quiet. And Emma had warned me that the quiet was the part to pay attention to, so I paid attention. I kept my head down, kept my routine, kept picking Lily up on Thursdays and dropping her off in the mornings when Vanessa was having a rough week with the treatment. I kept showing up, kept being present, kept being the kind of steady that I hoped Lily was starting to be able to count on even if she didn't have the words for it yet. But underneath all of that steadiness, something was shifting in me. A slow, deliberate shift, like a wrench finding its grip on a stubborn bolt. I was done waiting to see what Brett would do next. It was Emma who first started pulling the thread. She'd gone quiet in a different way than Brett's quiet. Not calculating, but focused. She had this habit when she was really working through something of going slightly unreachable. Still warm, still present, but with part of her brain somewhere else entirely. Running calculations you couldn't see. I'd started to recognize it. The slight furrow between her brows. The way she'd stop mid-sentence sometimes and look at nothing for 2 seconds before coming back. About 10 days after our conversation in the shop, she texted me on a Wednesday afternoon. "Can you come by grandfather's place this evening?" Around 7. "Bring nothing. Just come." I told her I'd be there. Walter's property was about 10 minutes out of town on a dirt road that turned off the county highway. I'd been there a handful of times by then. Emma had brought me along one Sunday afternoon a few weeks back, introduced me to the man over coffee and a piece of lemon cake he'd apparently made himself from scratch, which had genuinely impressed me. Walter was 81 years old, lean and deliberate in the way that people who've worked with their hands their whole lives tend to be, with a white beard trimmed close and eyes that were very blue and very sharp. He had the kind of face that didn't waste expressions. When he smiled, it meant something. When he didn't smile, it meant something too. The greenhouse Emma had mentioned was real, and it was something to see. A long glass structure behind the house, warm even in autumn, full of tomato plants that were enormous and impeccably kept and clearly his greatest ongoing project. He talked about them with a level of technical detail that I found unexpectedly fascinating. And when I asked the right questions, his eyes lit up in a way that made Emma smile at me over his shoulder. I liked Walter, more than I expected to. So, when I pulled up to the property that Wednesday evening and saw lights on in the kitchen and Emma's car in the drive, I felt something settle in me the way it did whenever I pulled into a place where the people were glad you were coming. Walter met me at the door before I knocked. "Henry," he said, stepping back to let me in. "Walter, thanks for having me." "Emma's in the kitchen," he said. "She's been at that table for 2 hours. Won't tell me what she's looking at, but she made that face she makes when she finds something." "What face is that?" He thought about it. "Like when you find the thing you've been looking for in the last place you check and you're relieved but also mad at yourself for not checking there first." I like that description a lot. Emma was at the kitchen table with her laptop open and 3 manila folders spread out beside it. There was a legal pad covered in her handwriting, tight, organized rows with arrows between them, and 2 empty coffee cups that she apparently hadn't noticed were empty. She looked up when I came in. "Sit down," she said. I sat. She turned the laptop to face me. "Brett Calloway has been doing this for a long time," she said. "He's good at it. He picks situations where he has leverage and he applies it quietly enough that nobody ever connects the dots. But when you know what you're looking at," she tapped the screen, "the pattern is pretty clear." I leaned forward. On the screen was a property transaction record, then another, then a third. Emma walked me through it methodically, the way she must have walked clients through complicated paperwork back in her law days. Clear, precise, no unnecessary drama, just the facts laid out in the order that made them most comprehensible. Brett worked in insurance, but over the past 8 years he'd also been quietly involved in a series of property acquisitions on the side. Nothing flashy, nothing on a scale that would attract attention, small parcels mostly. Rural land, older owners, transactions that went through quickly and below market value. Emma had found 4 of them so far in county records, all within a 100-mile radius. He targets older landowners, she said, people who are dealing with health issues or financial pressure or family complications. He introduces himself as a friend, builds a little trust, and then makes an offer that sounds reasonable but isn't. Gets them to sign while they're vulnerable. Is that illegal? I asked. Depends on the specifics, she said. Some of it might be unethical, but technically legal. Some of it, she flipped to a page in one of the manila folders, might be something else entirely. She slid the folder across to me. One of the transactions involved an 83-year-old man named Earl Briggs, who'd sold a 16-acre parcel to a holding company 3 years ago. The holding company, Emma had traced through 2 layers of paperwork, led back to Brett. Earl Briggs had signed the paperwork 6 days after being admitted to the hospital for a cardiac event. I looked up from the page. He signed while he was in the hospital, I said. He signed while he was on medication that affects decision-making capacity, Emma said. Which Earl's daughter, I found her, called her this afternoon, did not know about until after the sale went through. She'd been trying to dispute it ever since, but didn't have the resources to pursue it legally. I sat back in my chair. Earl's daughter, I said slowly. Does she still want to dispute it? Emma looked at me with that expression that was almost a smile, but not quite. She was very interested to hear from someone who knew what they were looking at, she said. I want to be honest about something here because I think it matters. I'm not a vengeful person by nature. I want to be clear about that. I've met people who run on grievance, who carry their wrongs around like fuel, and that's never been me. I fix things. That's how I'm wired. When something's broken, you figure out why and you fix it. You don't sit around angry at the broken thing. But this was different. This wasn't about me. I could manage what happened to me. I'd been managing things that happened to me my whole life. This was about a 6-year-old girl in a red jacket with uneven pigtails who had been living in a house for 6 years with a man who looked through her, who had been used, along with her mother as leverage and cover for a man who moved through people's vulnerabilities like a slow leak, quiet, patient, and deeply damaging. This was about Earl Briggs signing paperwork in a hospital bed. This was about however many other people Brett Calloway had identified as soft targets and slowly, methodically squeezed. So no, it wasn't revenge exactly, it was something more structural than that. It was the feeling of finding the root of a problem and deciding that this time, you're going to pull the whole thing out, instead of just treating what you can see above the surface. Emma understood that distinction without me having to explain it. Over the next week, we built what Emma called the file. It wasn't dramatic. It was mostly evenings at Walter's kitchen table with folders and a laptop, and Walter occasionally bringing in tea and asking no questions, which was its own kind of support. Emma worked through the property records with the focused patience of someone who'd done this professionally. I helped where I could, running down physical addresses, cross-referencing dates, making calls to people whose names came up in the documents, and introducing myself simply as someone looking into a situation. Earl's daughter, whose name was Pam, drove up from 2 counties over on a Saturday to meet with Emma. She brought a shoebox full of documents she'd been keeping for 3 years, things her father had signed, letters he'd received, a timeline she'd pieced together herself in the months after the sale went through. When Emma spread it out on the table alongside what she'd already found, they fit together the way pieces do when they've always belonged to the same picture. Pam cried a little when Emma explained what she'd found and what it potentially meant. I knew something was wrong, she said. I knew it from the beginning, but nobody wanted to hear it. They said my dad signed the papers. They said it was legal. They said I needed to accept it and move on. You were right, Emma said. And now you have documentation. I watched Emma across the table and thought about that first morning in the shop. The lost look, the sage green jacket, the relief of finding someone to talk to. I thought about how much was underneath that surface that I hadn't known yet. How much depth there was in a person that a Tuesday morning introduction couldn't possibly hold. I thought about how lucky I was that her coolant hose had come loose on my road. Vanessa called me on a Thursday evening while I was driving home from dropping off a set of documents at the copy shop in town. Brett asked me about Emma again, she said. What did he ask? Whether she's a lawyer, whether she has connections in the county, whether she's been asking questions about him. A pause. He's nervous, Henry. I can tell. He gets a specific kind of quiet when he's nervous, and he's been like that all week. Good, I said. Henry. Her voice dropped. Be careful, please. He's the kind of person who makes things complicated when he feels cornered. I know, I said. We're being careful. Another pause. Is she good? Vanessa asked. Emma, is she good to Lily? The question landed gently without accusation. Just a mother asking something real. She's really good, I said. Lily told her that stars are gas the first time they met, and Emma took it completely seriously. Vanessa laughed, a real one. The first I'd heard from her in a while. It sounded like something unclenching. That sounds like Lily, she said softly. She's something else, I said. Yeah, Vanessa said. She is. We were quiet for a second, both of us just sitting with that, the strange, complicated, imperfect situation we were both in. And Lily right at the center of it, completely unaware, probably at that moment reading a book about space or dissecting something she'd found in the garden, or asking Brett a question he didn't know how to answer and not caring that he didn't. She's going to be okay, I said. Whatever happens. She's going to be okay. I know, Vanessa said, and this time she sounded like she actually believed it. The file was ready on a Friday. Emma had spent the last 2 days organizing everything into a format that was clear and sequential and impossible to misread. 4 documented property transactions, Earl Briggs's case as the centerpiece with Pam's supporting documents, a timeline of Brett's interactions with Walter, and a brief summary of the pattern that tied it all together. She'd also, quietly and without making a big deal of it, been in contact with an attorney she'd worked with years back in the city. A woman named Adrienne who specialized in elder financial abuse and had a reputation, apparently, for being extremely good at her job and completely uninterested in being impressed by people like Brett. Adrienne had reviewed the file. She'd called Emma back within 24 hours. She said there's enough here to open a formal investigation. Emma told me Friday morning, both coffees on the bench between us. The Earl Briggs transaction alone has real legal exposure. The others build the pattern. She wants to take it. I looked at her. Pro bono? I asked. Pam can't afford otherwise, Emma said. And Adrienne said, she almost smiled. She said she's been waiting for a case like this for a while. I sat with that for a moment. When does it move? I asked. Adrienne files the complaint next week, Emma said. Once that happens, it goes to the county. There'll be an investigation. Brett's name goes into an official record. His employer in insurance gets notified because it's required. His license gets flagged while the investigation is open. I thought about that sequence. I thought about Brett Calloway's carefully maintained image, the soccer coaching, the firm handshake, the reputation as a solid community member. I thought about how much of his identity was built on that image, how much of his leverage over Vanessa came from being the stable, respectable one. An official complaint didn't destroy all of that overnight. But it was a crack, and cracks, given enough pressure, have a way of running. There's one more thing, Emma said. I looked at her. Adrienne wants to talk to Vanessa, she said. Not to build the case. She doesn't need Vanessa for that. But because Vanessa may have her own standing, financially. The way Brett has managed money in that household, controlled it specifically, that's potentially relevant to her and Lily's situation, especially given her medical circumstances. I understood what that meant. Not just legally. In terms of what Vanessa's life could look like on the other side of all this. Whether she and Lily would have the room to actually breathe after the treatment was done, after the dust settled, after Brett no longer had his hands on the controls. I'll talk to her, I said. Emma nodded. She picked up her coffee. She looked out at the road for a moment the way she sometimes did when she was wrapping something up internally. You know, she said, when I pulled over in front of this shop 2 months ago, I was not expecting any of this. Neither was I said. She looked at me sideways, that not quite smile at the edge of her mouth. I'm not complaining, she said. Neither am I said. We sat there in the morning light, the 2 coffees, the sound of Clutch doing his slow patrol outside, the town beginning to move around us in its quiet, ordinary way. And I thought about how the biggest moments in a life almost never announce themselves. They just show up on a Tuesday, in a sage green jacket with a loose coolant hose, and change everything. So gradually you don't even realize it's happening until you're already different. I was different. Not just because of Lily, though Lily was a seismic shift all on her own. Not just because of what Emma and I were building, though that was becoming something I couldn't imagine stepping back from. But because somewhere in the middle of all of this, the phone calls, the kitchen table sessions, the Thursdays, the music box, the manila folders, I had stopped being a man who just managed his life and started being a man who was actually living it. There's a difference. I know that now. And Brett Calloway, in his calculated, patient, squeezing way, had no idea what he'd walked into when he decided to make this personal. He thought he was applying pressure to a soft spot. He'd actually just handed me a reason to push back harder than I ever had before in my life. The complaint was filed on a Tuesday. Of course it was a Tuesday. I didn't find out what happened the morning the complaint was filed until about 3 hours after it happened. I was under a Jeep with a busted CV joint when my phone buzzed on the workbench, then buzzed again, then a third time in quick succession, which was unusual enough that I slid out from under the car, wiped my hands, and picked it up. 3 messages, all from Emma, sent within about 90 seconds of each other. First one, it's filed. Second one, Adrian just confirmed, official record as of this morning. Third one, also Brett just called my grandfather. I stared at that third one for a second, then I called her. She picked up on the first ring. How did he even know it was filed that fast, I asked. He didn't, she said. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. A particular kind of controlled energy that I'd come to recognize as Emma, managing something she felt strongly about. He called Walter before the filing. He'd been sitting on it. I think he decided overnight to make a move before things got complicated. What did he say? He made an offer on the land, she said. Formal this time. He had a number ready. He told Walter it was a good price for someone his age who might need flexibility in the coming years. She paused. He said, someone your age twice, apparently. I leaned against the workbench. Walter said no. Walter told him, and I'm quoting here directly from my grandfather, Emma said, that he'd grown tomatoes on that land for 31 years and would be growing them until he was carried off it horizontally, and that if Brett called again, he'd report the call to the county land office as harassment. Despite everything, I almost laughed. Your grandfather, I said, is an excellent man. He really is, Emma said. And then, more quietly, but Henry, Brett making that call this morning means he's feeling it. Something tipped him off that things are moving. He's trying to get ahead of it. Can he? I asked. No, she said. Simply, flatly, with the particular certainty of someone who has read the documents and knows what they say. It's already in the system. Adrian filed it with the county clerk and copied the State Insurance Regulatory Board because of Brett's license. That notification to his employer, that went out this morning too. Standard procedure. I thought about that. About Brett sitting in his office with his firm handshake and his immaculate silver sedan, opening an email he wasn't expecting, from a regulatory board he'd never thought would have his name in it. How long before it becomes public? I asked. The investigation itself is not public right away, Emma said. But his employer knows, the board knows, and Adrienne. She also sent a courtesy copy of the complaint summary to the local paper's county desk reporter. I went quiet for a second. A courtesy copy, I said. Public interest, Emma said. Elder financial abuse is a public interest story. Adrienne's done this before. She knows what she's doing. I set the phone down on the workbench for a second without hanging up, just to take a breath, and looked out the bay door at the road and the pale autumn sky above the tree line. Clutch was doing his slow lap of the parking lot, nose down, completely unbothered by everything, which I appreciated. I picked the phone back up. Emma, I said. Yeah. Thank you for all of this. I just want to say that clearly. A brief pause. You don't have to thank me, she said. I know I don't have to, I said. I want to. Another pause, shorter this time. Okay, she said softly. You're welcome. The next 48 hours were the strangest combination of completely ordinary and quietly electric that I've ever experienced. I kept working, kept opening the shop at the usual time, kept the music low on the old radio, kept doing the things that needed doing. 2 brake jobs, a coolant flush, a set of tires on a minivan belonging to a woman named Cheryl, who had 3 kids under 5, and the specific exhausted energy of someone running entirely on determination and caffeine. Life kept being life. But underneath it, something was building. The way pressure builds in a line before a fitting fails. You can't see it, but you can feel it if you've been doing this long enough. Vanessa called me Thursday morning. Something's happening at his office, she said without preamble. She sounded different, not frightened, but alert. Awake in a way she hadn't sounded in months. He came home last night and he didn't eat dinner. Just sat in his office with the door closed for 2 hours. He does that sometimes, but last night was different. Different how? I asked. He kept his phone in his hand the whole time, she said. He never does that. He's one of those people who puts his phone face down on the desk when he's done with it, like he's demonstrating self-control. But last night he held on to it, like he was waiting for something or trying to stop something from happening. Sounds like a man realizing the walls are moving, I said. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Henry, he doesn't know about you and Emma yet, not the full picture. He knows you're connected. He knows she asked questions about the land, but he doesn't know about the file or Adrian. He'll find out soon enough, I said. I know. Another pause. When he does, he's going to come at it sideways. That's how he works. He's not going to confront you, he's going to try to find something he can use. Let him look, I said. There's nothing to find. She took a breath. Okay, she said. Okay. Like she was settling herself. Oh, and Henry. Lily asked about you this morning. She wanted to know if you'd be picking her up next Thursday. Something in my chest did that thing it always did when Lily came up in conversation. That particular warmth that I still wasn't entirely used to but was starting to count on. Tell her yes, I said. Absolutely, yes. I heard Vanessa smile through the phone, a real one. I will, she said. Friday came and Emma showed up with the coffees, but she also had something else under her arm. A folded newspaper, the local weekly which came out on Fridays. She set it on the workbench and slid it toward me without saying anything, just watching my face. I picked it up. It wasn't front page. It was page 3, below the fold, a column-wide piece with a headline that read, County records raise questions about rural land transactions. No names yet. Adrian had been careful about that, Emma explained, because the investigation was still in its early stages, and naming Brett explicitly before the process had moved further would be legally premature. But the story described the pattern, the targeting of elderly landowners, the timing of transactions, the holding company structure, and it quoted, briefly and without identification, a local woman whose father had signed documents while hospitalized. That was Pam. I read the piece twice. It was careful, factual, and completely damning in the way that careful, factual things can be when the facts are bad enough. His colleagues are going to read this, I said. His colleagues read this paper every Friday, Emma said. Everyone in the county does. He'll know it's connected to him even without his name. Yes, she said. He will. I set the paper down and thought about that for a second. About Brett Calloway sitting at his desk in his insurance office reading this piece on a Friday morning with the regulatory board notification sitting in his email, and his employer asking questions he didn't have clean answers to. Emma, I said, has Adrian said anything about timeline? How long does the investigation take? Months, potentially, she said. These things move slowly. But the exposure, she tapped the newspaper, that's already happening. And Adrian is filing a motion next week related to Pam's father's transaction specifically. That one has the strongest grounds. If that motion succeeds, the other transactions become a much easier argument. And his insurance license? Flagged during the investigation, she said. which means his employer is required to put him on a compliance review. He can still technically work during that period, but she tilted her head slightly. It's the kind of thing that tends to change a person standing in an office pretty quickly. I thought about the firm handshake, the carefully maintained image, the soccer coaching on Saturday mornings. I thought about Lily being invisible in that house for 6 years. Good, I said quietly. Emma picked up her coffee. There's one more thing I need to tell you, she said. I looked at her. I talked to Adrian yesterday about Vanessa's situation specifically, she said. The financial control. The way Brett has managed money in the household. Adrian said that in the context of the broader case, Vanessa's circumstances are relevant. And, she paused, choosing her words carefully, Adrian has a colleague, a family attorney. Very good, very experienced. She wants to connect Vanessa with her. I understood what that meant immediately, not just legally. It meant Vanessa having her own representation, her own advocate, her own path through whatever came next that wasn't routed through Brett or dependent on him or shaped by what he wanted. Does Vanessa know? I asked. Not yet, Emma said. I wanted to talk to you first, because it's going to accelerate things. Once Vanessa has her own attorney, once she starts separating herself legally from Brett, he's going to know. And he's going to react. I nodded slowly. She needs to know, I said. She deserves to know what her options are. Agreed, Emma said. I just wanted us to be ready for what comes after. I looked at her across the workbench with the morning light behind her, and Clutch visible over her shoulder doing his patrol, and the town going about its Friday business beyond the bay door. And I thought, we. She'd said we without thinking about it. Like it was just obvious. Like it had been obvious for a while. We're ready, I said. She held my gaze for a moment and then nodded once. That firm, decisive nod that meant something was settled. I called Vanessa that evening. I told her about Adrian's colleague. I explained it carefully without pressure, laying out what it could mean for her and letting her sit with it. I half expected hesitation. 6 years of having someone else control the shape of your choices leaves marks, and I knew that. I knew she might need time. She didn't need time. Yes, she said. Before I'd even finished the full explanation, just, yes. Vanessa. Henry, she said, and her voice had something in it I hadn't heard before. Something that had been underneath everything else this whole time but was finally coming to the surface. I have been waiting for someone to show me a door. I just need someone to show me the door. I'll walk through it myself. I believed her completely. I'll have Emma send you the contact tomorrow, I said. Okay, she said. And then after a brief pause, Henry, can I ask you something? Yeah. Do you think Lily is going to be okay? Not just practically. I mean, do you think she's going to be okay inside? After all of this? I thought about the music box. I thought about her at the top of that slide. I thought about her sitting on the stool in my shop watching a ballerina spin and going completely still in that way that meant something had landed somewhere real and deep inside her. Yeah, I said. I really do. She's got more going on inside her than most adults I know. Vanessa made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and something more emotional than that. She gets that from her grandfather, she said. Not mine. Yours. That hit me in a place I wasn't prepared for. I didn't say anything for a moment because I didn't trust what would come out. Get some rest, I said finally. Tomorrow's a new day. It really is, she said. The following Tuesday, because apparently Tuesdays had decided to be the day things happened in my life, Brett showed up at my shop. I'd half expected it. Half not. Emma had said he'd come sideways, and I'd been watching for sideways. What I hadn't fully prepared for was the particular performance of it. He pulled up in the silver sedan at around 10 in the morning, parked neatly, which I noticed because everyone else who came to the shop parked with some degree of angle or approximation. But Brett pulled in straight and centered like he was being evaluated on it. He got out in dark slacks and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, which on another man might have read as casual, but on him read as calculated. Like he'd decided on exactly the right amount of relaxed. He was tall. I hadn't pictured that. About my height, maybe an inch more, with the kind of build that comes from a gym routine rather than actual work. His hair was dark, going gray at the temples in a way that probably read as distinguished to people who didn't know him. His face was pleasant in the way that a sales brochure is pleasant, designed to put you at ease. He walked toward the bay door and I stepped out to meet him on my own territory, which I'd decided in advance was important. I wasn't going to let him come inside. "Henry," he said, and put his hand out. I looked at the hand for a fraction of a second longer than necessary before I shook it. "Brett," I said. His handshake was exactly what I'd expected. Firm, measured, communicating something. "Nice setup you've got here," he said, looking around at the shop with the specific appreciation of someone who has no interest in what they're looking at. "Thanks," I said. "You've been spending time with my daughter," he said. No warm-up, no small talk. Straight to it, which told me he'd decided that friendly wasn't going to be convincing. "I've been getting to know Lily," I said. "Yes." "She's not your daughter," he said. I held his gaze. "We have different information about that," I said. Something moved across his face. Not anger exactly. More like the expression of someone recalculating. "Vanessa made a decision when Lily was born," he said. "Lily has grown up in a stable home. Disrupting that isn't something I'm planning to do," I said. "I'm not disrupting anything, I'm showing up." "There's a difference," he said. "Yeah," I said. "There is." He looked at me for a moment with those pleasant engineered eyes. "I don't know what Vanessa's told you," he said, his voice dropping slightly into something more confidential, man to man. "Or what that woman who's been asking questions about me has told you. But I want you to understand something. I've taken care of that family for 6 years. Whatever story you've been handed, whatever version of events, it's incomplete." "I'm sure it is," I said evenly. "Most stories are." He studied me. I got the sense he was looking for a reaction and not finding the one he wanted. "The land inquiry," he said. "That was a professional interest. Nothing personal." I didn't say it was personal. The questions being asked about my business dealings. "I don't know anything about your business dealings, Brett," I said, which was technically true. Emma and Adrian knew. I just knew enough to keep my mouth shut about what I knew. He looked at me for a long moment. A calculating look, the kind that's trying to determine whether the person across from it is bluffing or actually holding something. I held it steadily and didn't give him anything. "I think we got off on the wrong foot," he said finally, shifting register, going back toward Pleasant. "I'd like to handle this like adults." "I'm handling it like an adult," I said. "I'm showing up for my daughter every Thursday, I'm getting to know her, and I'm letting the legal process do what the legal process does." That last part landed. I saw it land. His jaw moved slightly. Not a flinch, but something adjacent to one. "What legal process?" he said carefully. "Whatever process is relevant," I said. Another long look. Then he nodded once, adjusted the rolled sleeve on his left arm as though it needed adjusting, and said, "Good talk, Henry," in a tone that was supposed to be dismissive. He got back in the silver sedan, pulled out of the lot, still perfectly straight, still perfectly centered, and drove away. I stood in the bay door and watched him go. Clutch appeared at my left knee. "I know," I told him. He sat down next to me and we both watched the road for a while. That night I was sitting on my back porch with a cold drink and the particular stillness of an autumn evening, the kind where the air has that clean-bitten quality and the stars are sharp. When my phone rang, it was Emma. "He came to the shop, didn't he?" she said, not a question. "Yeah." "How was it?" "He was exactly what you said he'd be," I said. "Controlled, pleasant on the surface, trying to read me." "Did he get anything?" "Nothing," I said. I heard her exhale. "Henry, Adrian called me an hour ago," she said. "The motion on the Briggs transaction. The judge fast-tracked it. There's a hearing date set for 3 weeks from now." I looked up at the stars, sharp and cold and extremely far away. "3 weeks," I said. "3 weeks," she said. We were quiet for a moment, both of us just sitting with that. "How's Walter?" I asked. "Growing tomatoes," she said warmly, completely unbothered. "Good," I said. "That's exactly right." Another beat of quiet, easy this time, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. "Emma," I said. "Yeah. I've been thinking about something." "Okay." I looked out at the dark tree line at the edge of my property. The one that turns gold in October and then bare, and then in spring does that thing where the green comes back so suddenly it's almost startling, like the whole thing was waiting and just needed permission. "When this is done," I said, "when the dust settles and Vanessa has her footing and Lily knows who I am and all of this has run its course." I paused. "I'd like to take you somewhere, not coffee at the shop, somewhere that's actually somewhere." A pause, a warm one. "Are you asking me on a date, Henry?" "I'm getting around to it," I said. She laughed. "The real one, the kind that comes out before the decision." "Okay," she said. "I'll consider the request pending." "Pending what?" "Pending the situation," she said. "Which, for the record, I think is going to resolve itself just fine." "Yeah?" I said. "Yeah," she said. "I've read the documents. The documents are good." I smiled at the dark tree line. "Good night, Emma." "Good night, Henry." 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And then everything Brett Calloway had built his careful life on was going to walk into a courtroom and sit down under a light it had never been designed to survive. I didn't know every detail of how it would go. I didn't need to. I knew that Pam had her shoebox of documents and a very good attorney. I knew that Earl Briggs's land was going to get a second look from a judge who had fast-tracked the hearing. I knew that Brett's employer had received a regulatory notification and his license was flagged. I knew that a reporter at the county paper had a story that was still developing. And I knew that somewhere across town, in a house she'd been trapped in for 6 years by a man who controlled the exits, Vanessa Cole had just gotten the phone number of a family attorney. I sat on my back porch until the cold pushed me inside. Then I went to bed and slept better than I had in weeks. The morning of the hearing I woke up before my alarm. Not because I was nervous exactly. More like the way you wake up early on a day that matters. Your body knows before your brain catches up, and it just brings you out of sleep quietly, like a hand on the shoulder. I lay there in the dark for a minute listening to the house. Clutch was breathing slow and heavy at the foot of the bed. Outside there was wind moving through the trees, that particular low sound it makes in late autumn when the branches are mostly bare and there's nothing to slow it down. I got up, made coffee and stood at the kitchen window watching the sky go from black to gray to that thin cold blue that comes just before sunrise. I thought about Earl Briggs signing papers in a hospital bed. I thought about Pam's shoebox. I thought about Vanessa saying I just need someone to show me the door. I'll walk through it myself. I thought about Lily at the top of that slide with her arms straight up. I got dressed and went to open the shop. I wasn't going to be at the hearing. That wasn't my place. This was Pam's case, Adrian's case, and the legal process doing what it was built to do. My job in all of this had been to be present where I was needed, and to stay out of the way where I wasn't. Emma had taught me that distinction, not in so many words, but in the way she'd handled everything. Precise, purposeful, no wasted motion. So I opened the shop, and I worked. I had a full day lined up, an oil change, a full brake job on a pickup belonging to a guy named Gerald, who'd been putting it off for 2 months and had finally run out of excuses. A check engine light on a minivan that turned out to be nothing more than a loose gas cap, which happens more than people would believe. Normal work. The kind that asks nothing of you except your hands and your attention. And that day I was grateful for exactly that. Clutch did his morning patrol and then settled in his spot in the sun just inside the bay door and watched traffic with his usual editorial indifference. Around 10:30 Emma texted. Hearing started. Adrian says judge is engaged. Pam is okay. I read it twice and set the phone back on the workbench and kept working. At 12:15, another text. Motion granted on Briggs' transaction. Judge ordered a full audit of the sale. Brett's holding company is now under formal review. I set down the wrench I was holding. I picked it back up. I kept working. At 1:40 Emma called instead of texting, which meant something had moved. I stepped out to the parking lot and picked up. Talk to me, I said. Okay, so. She took a breath, and there was something in her voice I hadn't heard before. a particular kind of compressed energy, like a spring that's been wound and is just now releasing. The judge granted the motion, which we knew. But then Adrienne did something she hadn't told me she was planning. What? She had documented all 4 transactions, Emma said. Not just the Briggs one. She presented the full pattern to the judge even though only the Briggs case was technically before him today. And she requested that the other 3 transactions be flagged for review under the same order. Can she do that? Apparently the judge thought so, Emma said. He agreed. All 4 transactions are now flagged. And, she paused, the State Insurance Regulatory Board had a representative at the hearing. Adrienne had notified them. It wasn't required, but she did it anyway. I stood in my parking lot in the cold with a grease rag in my hand that I'd forgotten I was holding. So his license, I said slowly. Suspended pending the full investigation, Emma said. As of today. He can't underwrite, he can't advise. He can't operate in his professional capacity until the review is complete. I looked out at the road. Emma, I said. I know, she said. How long is the review? Adrienne said minimum 6 months. Likely longer given the scope. 6 months minimum with a suspended license at an employer who'd already received a regulatory notification. For a man whose entire identity was built on the image of being stable, respectable, above reproach. I thought about the silver sedan, the rolled sleeves, the firm handshake, the way he'd looked at me in my parking lot and said good talk, Henry like he was dismissing something beneath him. The paper, I said. The reporter. Already called Adrienne, Emma said. There's a follow-up piece running Friday, this time with names. The hearing is public record. I exhaled slowly. How's Pam? I asked. Emma's voice softened. She cried in the hallway after. Adrienne said she just stood there against the wall and cried for about 5 minutes and then straightened up and said her father would have appreciated this. I closed my eyes for a second. Yeah, I said. He would have. Vanessa called me that evening. She knew. The family attorney Emma had connected her with, a woman named Deb, sharp and warm in equal measure from what Vanessa had described, had been monitoring the hearing and had called Vanessa the moment the decisions came through. Henry, she said when I picked up, and just from that one word I could tell she'd been crying. Not sad crying. The other kind. I heard, I said. You okay? I'm so okay, she said, which came out a little broken. I don't even know what I am right now. Deb called and she said it's real. It actually happened and She stopped, collected herself. I've been in this house for 6 years feeling like the walls were exactly the right distance apart because that's what I was used to, and then suddenly someone takes a wall away and you realize how small the space was. I sat down on the step of the shop's side entrance because my legs felt like they needed to do something other than just stand there. Where is he? I asked. Not here, she said. He left right after Deb called me, actually. I think he got his own call. From his office, probably. A pause. He came out of the bedroom with his jacket and his keys, and he looked at me, and I've never seen his face do that before. He always has that controlled thing. That pleasant manufactured thing. But for about 3 seconds he just looked at me and there was nothing there. No control, no performance. Just a man realizing the thing he built isn't standing anymore. She paused again. And then he left, she said. And I haven't heard from him since. I thought about that face. The 3 seconds with nothing behind it. I thought about what it costs a man like Brett to be seen without his armor on, even for 3 seconds, even by someone he'd spent years diminishing. Deb says the financial separation process can start immediately. Vanessa continued, her voice stabilizing as she moved into the practical part. She's already drafted preliminary documents. She says given the regulatory action and the investigation, Brett's leverage in any negotiation is significantly reduced. Good, I said. She also said, and this is the part I keep coming back to. Vanessa's voice did the thing again, that slight break she was trying to hold together. She said that in situations like this, where there's been financial control and documented pattern behavior, courts tend to look very carefully at the children's circumstances, at who has actually been present. Who has been showing up? I understood exactly what she was saying. Lily, I said. Yeah, she said softly. She asked about you again today, by the way. She wanted to know if you could fix roller skates. I laughed despite myself. Can she skate? She cannot skate at all, Vanessa said. But she's decided she's going to learn, so obviously she needs skates. Tell her I'll look at the skates, I said. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. A full, settled quiet. Henry, she said. Thank you for all of it. For picking up that first call. For not hanging up. For showing up every Thursday even when it was new and strange and none of us knew what we were doing. You don't have to. I do, she said. I need to say it. I spent 6 years thinking I'd made the right trade. Stability for truth. Safety for honesty. And I told myself it was fine. That Lily was fine. That fine was enough. Her voice was very quiet now. It's not enough. She deserves more than fine. You're more than fine, Henry. I didn't say anything for a second. She's going to be great, I said finally. She already is. Friday came. Emma showed up with the coffees like always, but she was also carrying a copy of the local paper folded under her arm and wearing an expression that was trying very hard not to be triumphant and not entirely succeeding. She set everything down on the workbench and unfolded the paper. Page 1 this time. Not below the fold. Page 1 above the fold, with a headline that read, Local insurance professional named in elder fraud investigation following court ruling. Brett Calloway's name was in the second paragraph. His employer's name was in the fourth. The holding company structure was laid out clearly and simply in a sidebar that any adult in the county could read and understand in about 90 seconds. I read the piece standing at the workbench with my coffee. Emma sat on the stool and watched me read it, and when I finished, I set it down and looked at her. How are you feeling? She asked. I thought about it honestly. Like when you've been working on a problem for a long time, I said, and you finally find the thing that was wrong. And it's smaller than you expected, but it was causing everything and you fix it and the whole machine just runs right again. She nodded slowly. Yeah, she said. That's about right. I looked at her across the workbench in the morning light. She had her coffee in both hands the way she always did. And her hair was down and there was something in her face that was open. More open than usual. Like something that had been held carefully in place had been allowed finally to just be what it was. Emma, I said. Henry, she said, at exactly the same moment. We both stopped. She smiled first. The real one. You go, she said. I was going to ask about that date, I said. The one that's been pending. She tilted her head slightly. The situation has resolved itself. Most of it, I said. Enough of it, she said. So that's a yes? She picked up her coffee. That's a yes, Henry. I want to tell you about the Saturday about 3 weeks after all of that. Because I think it's the moment everything actually landed for me. Not the hearing, not the newspaper, not Brett's suspended license or the investigation or any of the legal machinery turning the way it was supposed to turn. All of that mattered, and I'm not diminishing it. But the moment that actually landed, the one I keep coming back to when I think about that whole season of my life, was a Saturday morning at my shop. I'd invited Lily to come see the place properly. Not a rushed Thursday pickup, not a quick stop. Actually come see it, spend some time, understand what it was. Vanessa dropped her off at 9 in the morning, and Lily came through the bay door wearing overalls and those purple star boots and carrying the music box, which she apparently brought everywhere now, and she stopped in the middle of the shop floor and looked around slowly with those serious brown eyes. It smells like my grandpa's garage, she said. Is that good or bad? I asked. She thought about it carefully. Good, she decided. Emma was there too. She'd come by with coffees and ended up staying, which had been my quiet hope when I mentioned the morning to her earlier in the week. She was sitting on the bench outside the bay door with Clutch's enormous head in her lap, reading something on her phone, and when Lily spotted her, she walked straight over without hesitation. You're here, Lily said, like this was both a fact and an approval. I'm here, Emma said, scratching Clutch behind the ears. Lily sat down next to her and immediately put the music box on her knee and wound it and let the ballerina spin. Clutch watched the ballerina turning with a mildly confused but benevolent expression. Emma watched Lily watch the ballerina, and I stood in the bay door watching all three of them in the morning light. This woman I was falling in love with, and this child who was mine, in every way that counted, and I felt the strangest thing. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not in a fairy tale way. Not in a way that meant everything was simple or resolved or tied up. Vanessa was still in treatment. The legal process was still moving. Lily still didn't officially know who I was, though Vanessa and I had agreed that conversation was coming soon. Very soon. And I'd been quietly turning over in my head every night how to make it gentle and right, and something she could hold on to instead of something that knocked her sideways. There was still a lot of road ahead. But right there in that moment, with the music box playing its tinny little melody and Clutch sighing contentedly and Emma saying something quietly to Lily that made her laugh, that real, unguarded kid laugh that sounds like water over rocks, I felt a kind of peace I hadn't felt in longer than I could name. 2 weeks after that Saturday, on a Thursday afternoon, I picked Lily up from school like always. We drove the usual route. She talked about a project she was doing on the solar system, of course she was, and explained to me at some length the difference between a planet and a dwarf planet, and why Pluto's reclassification was, in her view, unfair and politically motivated, which I found extraordinary coming from a 6-year-old but did not say so, because I had a feeling she wouldn't take it well. When I pulled up to Vanessa's house, Vanessa was sitting on the front step waiting for us. She didn't usually do that. She usually met us inside or at the door, especially since the treatment had been tiring her out. But she was on the step, and she was wearing her better jacket, and she had a look on her face that I recognized immediately as someone who has made a decision and is at peace with it. Lily jumped out of the truck and ran up the path and then stopped when she saw her mom's expression. "What's happening?" Lily said, because she always knew when something was happening. "Come sit with me a minute, baby," Vanessa said. I got out of the truck slowly and walked up the path and stood at the edge of the step, and Vanessa looked up at me and gave me a single nod. And I understood. Today was the day. Lily sat down next to her mom and looked between us with those wide, serious eyes. "You know how Henry picks you up every week," Vanessa started. "Yeah," Lily said. "And you know how you've been spending time at the shop. And he fixed your music box." "Yeah," Lily said slowly, clearly calculating. "There's something we want to tell you about why Henry is in your life," Vanessa said. She looked at me again and I came and crouched down so I was at Lily's level, right there in front of her on the front path in the cool afternoon light. Lily looked at me. Straight on, direct, those brown eyes going right into mine. And before either of us could say anything else, she said, very quietly, like she'd known for a while and had just been waiting for someone to confirm it, "Is he my dad?" Vanessa made a sound. I don't know how to describe it exactly. Like something that had been held for 6 years finally getting to be released. "Yeah, baby," she said. "He is." Lily looked at me for a long moment. I didn't say anything. I just looked back at her and let her have the moment, let her turn it over in that remarkable little mind of hers, let her find where it fit. Then she did something I wasn't prepared for at all. She leaned forward and put her arms around my neck. Not dramatically. Not with the big emotional presentation of a movie moment. Just quietly, straightforwardly, the way she did everything. She decided something and she did it. She put her arms around my neck, and I put mine around her, and I held on, and I felt 6 years collapse into one single point and disappear. She smelled like school and something faintly like the strawberry shampoo Vanessa had mentioned she was obsessed with, and a little bit like the outside air from the truck ride home. She felt like mine. Because she was. I'm writing this from my kitchen table on a Sunday morning, about 4 months after that afternoon on the front step. Clutch is asleep under the table with his head on my foot, which he's decided is his right. There's a music box on the shelf across the room, next to a small framed photo that Emma took one Saturday morning without making a big thing of it. Me and Lily in the shop, her on the stool across the workbench from me. both of us looking at something I was explaining. I don't know what I was explaining. I don't remember. But in the photo, she's leaning forward with her elbows on the bench, and she has that particular look she gets when something actually interests her. And I'm looking at her and I look like a man who can't quite believe his luck. That's because I am. Emma is coming over for dinner tonight. She's been coming over for dinner on Sundays for about 2 months now, which started as a casual thing and quietly became the best part of my week. And I've stopped pretending it's casual. She knows I've stopped pretending. She stopped pretending around the same time. Vanessa finished her last round of chemo 6 weeks ago. The scans came back clean. I know she's not out of the woods entirely. That's not how it works, and she knows that too. But she walked out of that last appointment and called me from the parking lot, and I could hear the sun in her voice. She and Deb have been working through the legal separation steadily. Brett, whose license is still suspended and whose name has been in the county paper 3 times in 4 months, and who resigned from his soccer coaching position in November, has offered very little resistance. Men like Brett, Emma explained once, tend to fold when the audience disappears. When there's no image left to protect, there's not much fight in them. He sees Lily on a schedule now, supervised, decided by people who looked at the full picture and made a decision based on what was best for her, rather than what was convenient for him. She doesn't talk about him much. When she does, it's matter of fact, neither warm nor bitter, just factual. The way she is about most things. She's processing it in her own Lily way, which is to say quietly and thoroughly and in her own time. She told me last week that she wants to learn how engines work. I told her we'd start with the basics. She said she didn't want the basics, she wanted to understand the whole system. I looked at her for a second. Okay, I said. We'll start with the whole system. She seemed satisfied with this answer. I've thought a lot about what this whole thing taught me, sitting with it in the quiet way you sit with things once the noise is over. I think it's this. Some of the most important things in your life don't knock. They just show up a little lost with a loose hose and a canvas bag that's carrying more than it looks like it is, and they stand in your parking lot and wait to see what you do. What you do matters. Not the big dramatic version of what you do, not the speeches or the confrontations or the moments that would look good in a movie. The small, continuous version. The Thursday pickups, the coffee on the bench, the music box, the shoebox of documents that a daughter kept for 3 years because she knew something was wrong and refused to let it go. The showing up, over and over, in the ordinary ways that turn out not to be ordinary at all. Brett Calloway spent years squeezing people quietly, patiently, believing that the slow application of pressure to soft spots was the most powerful move available to him. And maybe in some situations it is. But he'd never counted on the soft spot having people around it who knew exactly how to push back. He'd never counted on a woman with a canvas bag and 4 years of property law, and a grandfather who grew tomatoes, and absolutely no interest in being squeezed. He'd never counted on me. And he'd definitely, without question, not even close, never counted on Lily. Because the morning after I told her who I was, she came to the shop with Vanessa for a short visit, and she walked straight up to the workbench and put both hands flat on it and looked at me and said, "So, if this is your shop, and you're my dad, does that mean when I grow up, I can work here too?" I looked at her for a second. "You'd have to learn engines first," I said. "I know," she said like that was already decided. "I told you I want to understand the whole system." I smiled. "Then yeah," I said. "This can be yours too." She looked around the shop, the old radio, the pegboard with the wrenches, the cracked concrete floor with its permanent map of everything I'd ever fixed, the rectangle of morning light coming in through the bay door, and she nodded once slowly with the gravity of someone accepting something serious. Then she picked up a socket wrench off the bench, turned it over in her hands and said, "Okay, show me how this works." And I did.